Okay, welcome to our special RightsCon session powered by the ASEAN Coalition to #Stop Digital Dictatorship. We're a group of Southeast Asian human rights organizations teaming up to resist attacks on our online democracies. I'm Debbie Stothard, one of the members of the coalition and coordinator of ASEAN Burma. Today, with feminist members of the coalition, we will be looking at how can the Global South protect itself from unchecked AI ethics and ensure data protection? Or as I would prefer to nickname this session, can the natural intelligence of Global South feminists mitigate poor regulation and weaponization of artificial intelligence? The rapid development of AI technologies and their digital infrastructures has seen mining of copious amounts of personal data into monetized and securitized outputs. In the absence of protocols governing how this is done, AI may and actually is used in a discriminatory manner. Marginalized and groups, including racial and ethnic minorities, LGBTIQ+ communities, women and third gender people are disproportionately affected by this serious gap in human rights protection. So what is AI? AI, or artificial intelligence, not Amnesty International, artificial intelligence is an umbrella term which could mean all sorts of things. There's no consensus on what AI or artificial intelligence entails because we don't even have a concrete definition of what intelligence is and how it can be quantified. That accounts for world politics and the way things are at the moment. But anyway, so to avoid mansplaining, the AI technology that we will be talking about in this panel is machine learning, a type of application that enables systems or computers to learn and improve at predicting outcomes without being explicitly programmed. This is different from standard algorithms that simply perform a task as instructed. We have 4 kick-ass, inspiring speakers who will speak for 10 minutes each or face the Debbie algorithm, which is a timer and me going slash, slash, slash. Okay, so everyone's going to talk for 10 minutes and then we will open up the floor to questions. Now, to our audience, please spare us the mansplaining questions or comments. Actually, ask us real questions. If you spare us mansplaining questions or comments, we will spare you a detailed analogy of why unethical AI stinks more than a day-old used tampon. Okay? Yes, I said it. So, one of the most extensive debates regarding AI is about the gender divide, which is why we have a bunch of kick-ass feminists here this morning or this evening, wherever you are. AI algorithms, either by design or unintentionally, pose serious biases against women and gender minorities. In the Global South, this problem is magnified by patriarchal values rooted in history, culture, and religion. Our first speaker, Lisa Garcia, is Executive Director of the Foundation for Media Alternatives, a Philippine-based nonprofit which assists citizens and communities in the strategic and appropriate use of information and communications technologies for democratization and popular empowerment. Prior to joining FMA, Lisa worked for an NGO focused on women and migration. She's currently a member of the board for the Center for Migrant Advocacy, which is also based in the Philippines. So Lisa, how have women been marginalized and excluded by skewed algorithm processes and automation? Over to you for the next 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. That was an enlightening introduction you gave on AI. Yeah, and yeah. So when we talk about artificial intelligence and gender in the digital spaces, yeah, there's if you look at the digital space, there's we as users, we spend a lot of time online, and when we are online, we generate a lot of data, we share a lot of information, and that information is useful for companies. This is something that they can harvest, that they can use to know more about us. For instance, when we talk about social media companies, they use artificial intelligence to monitor the comments, the posts, and other data generated in order to understand how.
Sorry, Lisa, you've been muted.
Sorry, did I mute myself? Sorry. So okay, let me continue that. As I was saying, a lot of us are online, and we usually use social media, and social media companies likewise use artificial intelligence to monitor, the comments, the posts that we make, and other data generated to understand how much us as users are using their platform, no? In the context of its users. AI is being used by them to identify also inappropriate remarks, for instance, to track and for them to be able to track and remove abusive speech. So in a way, they're trying to help fight also against hate speech and cyberbullying, which happens a lot online. However, when you look at AI online, sometimes it can be intrusive as well, because, for instance, every time we go online, we receive recommendations. Let's say if you're chatting, let's say with a friend, you want to go on a vacation. All of a sudden, you receive a recommendation about a beach resort that you can go to, things like that. When you're watching a video, then you receive recommendation to watch a similar video, and things like that. It's intrusive. It's as if someone is listening to you, and yeah. And because of that, they're able to suggest post advertisements, friend suggestion, etc. Supposedly, that is to help improve customer service, no? But these companies are actually using it to gain insights about us. Well, perhaps, as you said earlier, the intention may be good because they also want us to have a good experience, but at the same time, artificial intelligence can also have a negative impact on the experiences of women and gender diverse individuals. First of all, when we talk about AI, there's a bias with regards to artificial intelligence when we're talking about gender. And I'm not talking here just about the, I'm not just talking here about the gender bias when it comes to the workplace, meaning that there are more men than women in the AI workforce. Let me cite a few examples. No, for instance, the voice assistants or virtual assistants. Of course, we're familiar with Alexa, there's Siri, there's Cortana, and we are glad they're there for us because they respond to our voice command and make life easier for us. But how is it that these assistants are female? They have female voices. So if you look at it historically, women have always been looked at as they're seen as submissive, and this is reflected in the online world, in the bias of AI technologies. That's how I look at it, who develop this virtual assistant. So it's like they're propagating the stereotype of women as being submissive, and that these women are, they're there to perform the job of an assistant. Yeah. The other example is when we look at language translations. For instance, if there's Google Translate, there's an issue when it comes to gender when we look at translation online, especially if you're translating from a language, let's say the language in the Philippines, Filipino, I don't know, maybe in Bahasa, in other languages, into English. The thing is that in some languages are gender neutral. For instance, in the Filipino language, our pronouns do not have gender. So if we're trying to translate, let's say, a sentence that says, this person is a president, and then this person is doing laundry. If you translate it into English, it would be he is president and she is doing laundry. So why is the president a he and the one doing laundry a she? So you see here that the algorithm for translation is not gender neutral, and what it does is automatically assigns which is masculine and feminine And when we know that is not really the case. And then, of course, facial recognition. There are many apps already, software for facial recognition. And this softwares can categorize gender with remarkable accuracy. However, if a face belongs to let's say, a transgender person or to women of color, then the system gets it wrong more than a third of the time, according to a study. So maybe Jean later on can further elaborate on that. And then my second point is that artificial intelligence can be used for nefarious purposes, and these have consequences on women. Let's take a look at deepfakes, for instance. So a deepfake is a type of artificial intelligence used to create convincing images, audio, and video hoaxes. So they're also being used to spread false news, for false information. And usually the predominant use of these deepfakes is to create sexual videos of women without their consent. So in a way, this is a new way to harass women, to humiliate them, and to deploy gender-based violence. And they have been used to discredit women a lot, including, for instance, I can give an example, women politicians in my country, in the Philippines, being discredited through the use of artificial intelligence. They are used to intimidate women, to silence them by, for instance, in the case of one senator in the Philippines, Senator Leila de Lima, some of you may have heard of her. She has been vocal about her critique on the human rights violation of President Duterte, especially when he was still a mayor of a city in the southern part of the Philippines. So de Lima exposed the findings that they did on the death squad in the city, and for this she was framed to be a coddler of drug lords and was jailed, and to this day she's still in jail. So, and to further discredit her, there were alleged sex videos of her that circulated online, and you know, even Congress even wanted to have it shown during a congressional public hearing. That's how it is, you know. Well, the thing is that, you know, gender-based deepfakes gender-based deepfake targeting is problematic because, you know, the tools to create such content are already accessible to many, and there are even mobile applications that can turn, you know, just put a picture there of a woman and then she can become undressed, things like that. So, and then that photo or image can then be circulated in pornographic content. And this happened, like we just had our elections in the Philippines this May 2022, and a fake video of one of the daughters of the vice president who was then running for presidency, started circulating in social media. So they made it appear that there is a nude image of the vice president's daughter, and they did that to discredit the reputation and the image of Vice President Robredo and her family, because Robredo was really gaining support during the elections. Of course, we also know of, you know, attacks on women human rights defenders and journalists. I'm sure a lot of us here can cite examples. Human rights activists, human rights defenders, especially the women, are very vocal and active in the work that they do. And there is backlash for that. If you are very critical, sometimes you just find yourself, your photo online, already being manipulated, and then there's that image of you, maybe it's nude, they can put it in a porn site, and it can tarnish your reputation and your image as a human rights defender. So those things are happening a lot, and that is something that we have to look into and to address as well.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to come back to you. Sorry, that's my timer. Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to come back to you after everyone's spoken, because I'm really interested in what you have to say on how we can combat gender bias in AI. But I would like to move on to our next speaker, Jean Linus Dinko. is ILGA Asia's first Strategic Communications Fellow. She's currently a doctoral candidate in cybersecurity at the University of New South Wales in Canberra, Australia. Before joining ILGA Asia, Jean worked as a public information consultant for the United Nations Human Rights and as a digital project manager for Away Home Australia, a youth homelessness organization based in Melbourne. Jean has been awarded by the Women in AI Ethics, a fiscally sponsored project of Social Good Fund, as one of the top 100 women in artificial intelligence ethics. So, Jean, how do algorithms affect LGBTIQ plus people at the intersection of power relations and class struggle? Are data-driven sexual orientation predictions harmful? Over to you for the next 10 minutes.
Thank you, Debbie. So I would just like to point out that there is quite a growing number of applications of machine learning in various sectors of our society. And the opportunities are quite endless, that's only to say the least, because even our Netflix recommendation system is machine learning. And I could go on, citing examples of how machine learning has transformed many aspects of our lives. But as with all technological disruption, there are winners and there are losers. And that's contrary to the overarching narrative that machine learning algorithms are neutral. So, which is often used by marketers and corporations to sell their products. Some even go as far as to use the word AI, even though they're just meant if-else statements. But let's not go into that. So to call machine learning neutral is a misnomer. It is a myth. That's actually Kranzberg's first law of technology, that technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. And some would probably here would argue that algorithms are not political and that they are only being politicized. But that's a very simplistic take. So, because all algorithms are political, and that is regardless of the intent of the maker. That's quite a controversial statement, but as Langdon Winner said in 1993, which is still quite relevant today, that it is not only about how technology is constructed, but how it could be reconstructed. And as machine learning saturates our everyday lives, it is important to assess the power relations between those who make or design the technology and those who are on the receiving end. So, because often those who design our technologies are often living in status of privilege. And this goes beyond the global north and the global south divide. It looks at the division in a granular approach by zooming in on class struggle, because even in countries or in developing countries or in the global south, there are a number of political elites and oligarchs, if you must, with the help of technological companies who commodify and securitize their own people for the sake of profit and political gains. Machine learning affects queer people in the global south in a different way than it affects our counterparts in the global north. First, global south people do not have the same access to the legal safeguards that queer people in the global north do. Second, there is data disparity, which is often aggravated by a lack of access to technology and socioeconomic disparity. And third, global south people are often treated as testing grounds for various machine learning algorithms before releasing them into the global north. So you can see from issues related to the right to privacy, right to equality and non-discrimination, freedom of thought, and over surveillance, machine learning can affect global south queer people in a manner that we would not have seen elsewhere. Because a technology designed for the global north people usually does not translate well when it is exported to the global south population. And Wine could probably, talk us about how, when Facebook was brought to Myanmar and how damaging it was. because it's mainly saying that what works in Norway will definitely not work in the Philippines or in Indonesia. And even within the queer community, we are not homogenous, because some of us are already standing in other countries, but there are still others who are still on the floor. And as long as we do not acknowledge that, we will not have the same vision. So take, for example, the research on inferential technology or recognition methods to detect queer people based on photographs or online behavior, which is pretty much born out of the hyper-capitalist society that seeks to micro-target people so they could buy their products. Tech companies now have access to their consumers' inner desires, political leanings, preferences, emotions, likes, and even dislikes. So therefore, it will be easier for these consumers to be targeted with ads that replicate their identity, or with stories that validate their political leanings. And that is a violation of our freedom of thought. And the thought of wanting to detect someone's sexuality and gender based on data collected is already creepy per se. Not only that, it has tremendous impact if it ends up being used in countries where homosexuality is criminalized or even punishable by death, or in countries where entities can use that technology to out LGBT people or identify them in random photos they found online, which can have horrifying impacts to their relationship with their society. They can be bullied, they can lose their jobs, their livelihood, or even their lives. Or in airports, where transgender people get securitized for presenting themselves in a gender that is incongruent with their documents. And some may say that this is just me being an alarmist, but no, it is not, because this is already happening in many countries without the use of machine learning. So for instance, a recent newspaper article in Malaysia has published a story on how to detect gay people based on their physical features alone. And as a trans person myself, I had my fair share of being stopped at airports because my documents are incongruent with how I present in public. Sometimes we trans people we could get lucky and find an airport officer who knows what is going on, but automating these processes rarely gives space to those who do not fit in the binary cookie cutter. Trans people are automatically branded as fraudulent, as someone who's hiding. And this does not happen by chance, because it is most often the powerful and the rich who have the monopoly on how technology can be deployed to maintain the status quo. And it is only a matter of when, not if, this new technology comes to the hands of regimes where being queer is punishable by extensive jail time, corporal punishment, and even death. So what can we do to mitigate the negative effects of machine learning, you may ask? Well, the current free market society that we live in does not really work well in the context of these emerging technologies. So there are machine learning ethics standards and there is human rights law. However, the law is just a benchmark, and often it is not enough. And there are a lot of loopholes that people can really, travel into. And we can. Well, I want to point out a common approach how tech companies try to solve this kind of issue, and it is often by hiring a diverse team. Diversity and inclusion can only do so much. It is insufficient and it is weak. It is often just for public relations that company can use when convenient. Hiring more trans people in your workplace will not change a single thing if the power structure within the workplace remains. And this is bordering identity politics and how elite capture has transformed identity to serve their own goals. And to researchers in the field of emerging technology like myself, I just want you to think before you conduct your research. So no matter what your end goal is, think twice or thrice if you must about why such technology needs to exist. Your end goal may be to raise awareness of an issue, but remember that you are not the only one who's going to use this technology. And as you move forward in your careers, ask questions and investigate who would benefit and who would get harmed from the advent of the new technology, and to what extent. We have to step out of our insular thinking and contextualize our research in countries where people are being killed for the same thing that we are taking for granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean, for enlightening us on that, of bringing class into the picture, class and power into this picture, into this discussion, and reminding us that rainbow washing is not good enough. And Lisa has already explained some of the ways in which AI technologies have been used to target women, including women politicians and women human rights defenders. So, and Jean referred earlier on about Facebook and the Rohingya. So we're very, very lucky that we have Weiwei Nu, a Rohingya feminist who is a former political prisoner. Weiwei actually was a teenage political prisoner, and she, when she was released from 7 years of incarceration in the notorious insane prison in Burma, Myanmar, she founded the Women Peace Network and Yangon Youth Center. And Weiwei had, despite being vilified, attacked, harassed, and threatened, Weiwei continues to work to build peace and mutual understanding between Burma's ethnic communities and to empower marginalized women throughout the country, particularly in Rakhine State. She's recently a Draper Hill Summer Fellow at Stanford University Center on Democracy, Development, and the Rule of Law, and Weiwei is currently a visiting senior research fellow at the Human Rights Center, the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. So Weiwei, how have social media platforms, especially Facebook and the algorithms, been weaponized in Burma, Myanmar, and in particularly in the context of the Rohingya genocide? Over to you for the next 10 minutes, Weiwei.
Thank you very much, Debbie. And we were just talking that we need your energy and enthusiasm these days, in many depressing issues are haunting us in many, many ways. So thank you, organizer, for all the organizers for this incredible panel. And it was extremely enlightening to hear from Lisa and Jean. Most of the things that you guys have discussed been very personal to me. And I have been one of the subject has been affected in many levels, in many ways, by the Facebook and social media at large. But I'm not going to discuss personal effect of social media and my work and my life. But I'm going to discuss about the case of Rohingya and how the Facebook and algorithm has negatively impacted on the Rohingya as a whole. It is true that the algorithm is not designed to address inequality and disparity among the different people, social group, and different groups within among the global North and global South, as well as among gender and among the social, the other racials and religious minority groups. And the case of Myanmar is a clear example of how AI is disproportionately affected against the minority groups, while the users, the majority of the users on the platform could be from a majority populations of that social group or that society. and it may also affect on who has the privileged class and who has access to this, based on who has access to this technology itself. In the case of Rohingya, as you know, Rohingya are a very small minority group in Myanmar, and our population, it has been deeply marginalized and persecuted for generations, for decades. Therefore, we have very little voice on the social media in general. And because of the persecutions and deprivations of rights, most of our people does not have access to information and access to technology as a whole. And there were situations in Rakhine State that the authorities were seizing phone from the Rohingya people. So basically, only those like we may have very small number of populations who may have access to telephone devices and technology as a whole. Even among them, the authorities were authorities mean the militaries were basically seizing, there were effort to seize the technologies and telephone devices from the Rohingya population. To this day, Rohingyas are not allowed to have computer or laptop in their houses, let alone publicly, obtaining them publicly. So therefore, access to technology and to be present on the social media for the Rohingya is very, very unlikely, or it's very limited. Therefore, with the nature of machine learning, there is the trend on the social media is lacking. Was lacking the Rohingya voices. It was the majority voices manipulating the social media trend and what's happening on Facebook. That was one of the main factors that contributed to the entire hate campaign. And the other thing is around as previous speakers has discussed, the AI has not been introduced in an ethical manner or regulatory with the regulations or careful and strategic. It wasn't deployed in a strategic manner to address some of the gaps that we have in the society. And therefore, the Facebook in Myanmar, Facebook and its algorithm have been observed to have spread information and hate against their religious and ethnic minority groups. There were many examples that I could point out. The users were permitted to post and engage with the very hateful content, such as we must fight them the way Hitler did the Jews, or pour fuel, set fire so that they can meet Allah faster, or kill all of them and send them back, send Bengali back to Bangladesh. Such and such hate speech were allowed and permitted, and they were optimized throughout their social media based on the majority's trend. They were warning by the media and organizations, and including community themselves. I remember many of us reach out to the Facebook many times, reporting some of these behaviors and asking them to take actions. Yet Facebook has failed to take actions and to regulate this widespread and rapid proliferations of hate speeches. They basically not only failed to delete these accounts or remove this account, but also there were incidences, there were times that even those people who were promoting positive messages or countering these hate speeches, or the people, the Rohingya individual who were reporting from the ground, their pages or their account were for some reason they were deleted or they were removed. So there were questions around whether, yes, it is, we know that a lot of these are happening due to the AI, but also were there any other reason why instead of deleting hateful hate content and users that are promoting hate speech, but in deleting or removing the users who are countering hate speech, and that also undermine a lot of the to counter all the hate speech that was happening at that time. There is that also undermine the balance of informations and the balance in the content on the social media from the minority voice and from the people who are countering this hate. Till today, I mean, it is the reality that those people who have more resources, for example, the military, technical resources, financial resources, and many other human resources to really deploy hate on social media, where the minority populations or affected populations, or in general, people from the minority groups might not have enough voices in there, or balanced voices in there. And to this day, we are not able to address that as well, because oftentimes those who try to combat those hate speech or balance them, provide the real content or positive content, or counter those speeches where face so many levels of challenges and barriers, and sometimes often being removed by the Facebook. I think this is another problem that we have to raise and discuss as we discuss about the AI. So the company's failure to regulate such inflammatory content gave rise to violence extremism against the Rohingya online, which then escalated into targeted act of brutality offline, as was demonstrated in 2017 genocide. We all know that companies like Facebook, social media companies, tech companies, they all have an objective or goal of growing their businesses in the market. It was the case for Myanmar as well. Facebook maintained its algorithm for keeping its users online across the country and implemented a business model for addicting user to highly engaging content that coincide in their beliefs or opinion, so that their existing views are reinforced and devoid of ideas alternative to their own. In the case of Rohingya, these measures, the Facebook lack of regulations, therefore incentivize more and more of the platform users to create and share and engage with content propagating hate against the Rohingya. Such hatred were realized into an act of violence leading up to, again, in 2016 and 2017 genocide. Therefore, in prioritizing its profit, Facebook clearly sacrificed the life of the Rohingya people. And a former Facebook employee leaked a secret in 2021, revealing that the company executive consciously choose to allow hate and hatred to grow on the platform, even though they knew their algorithm were putting their users at various forms of risks. Moreover, Facebook uses AI to detect hate speech. 80% of the hate speech online is detected by the AI, not human. The issue is that...
Wait, I'm going to have to jump in and ask you to wrap up. We are over time. Sorry.
All right, that's perfect. So basically, to summarize a few other things that I want to mention, yeah, so language was one of the problem, and the Burmese language has many nuances and many direction to it, and because it was dealing with the AI, not by the human. There were so many problems that had created through the language barrier and language disparity as well. And later on, like after the genocide happened in 2017 and 2018, later Facebook has deployed some human Burmese-speaking content moderator, yet the problems are still exist. The problems has not been addressed yet. And at the end of the 2021, months later after the military attempted coup in February, it was also reported that Facebook recommendations algorithms still invites user to like pages that share pro-military propaganda. So it is ongoing, and there is no solution to it. And there are some Rohingya groups actually sued Facebook in December 2021 in the US, in the UK, for its alleged failure to take actions against the online hate speech, and that ultimately contributed to our genocide. Hopefully, it will lead a discussion to have a more regulatory environment for these tech companies and social media companies, and hopefully there will be a sort of resolutions with the companies and those communities who are affected by their system. So including the Rohingya. The Facebook has not publicly apologized, or Facebook has not actually compensated or did anything for the Rohingya, the community that affected by their product severely. So I hope that there will be some discussions around this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wei. I think what Wei mentioned talks about, it really encapsulates some of the key points that Lisa and Jean have illustrated, giving us quite a well-rounded understanding of how women, people from minorities, and different and diverse gender identities and sexual orientation are affected, as well as people who are different in terms of their race, perceived race and religion. And Wei refers to a litigation last year where lawyers tried to sue Facebook. The Rohingya community tried to sue Facebook in 2 countries. But we also understand that pushing back against juggernauts also have reprisals, and that biased and unethical AI actually intensifies existing discrimination and persecution and marginalization of vulnerable communities. So I'm pleased to actually come to our final speaker for this session. Emily Pradicit is an intersectional feminist visionary and human rights lawyer. She's the founder and director of Manushya Foundation, a feminist, women-led nonprofit reinforcing the power of women human rights defenders and local communities in their fight for equality, social justice, and human rights in Thailand and Laos. As part of Manushya's digital rights portfolio, Emily authors the yearly Freedom of the Net Thailand country report with Freedom House and monitors the digital rights situation in the region. She's actually the founder of the ASEAN Coalition to #StopDigitalDictatorship. She recently received the Leader by Head and Heart Award. And before starting Manushya, Emily was Asia Regional Director of UPR Info and worked for several years for the United Nations in New York and Bangkok, as well as the French Foreign Ministry in Paris. So Emily, Thailand 4.0 is supposed to pivot the country's economy on AI and robotics. Thailand has adopted the Personal Data Protection Act and the National AI Ethics Guidelines. Is this enough, or is this as much difference as a birthday candle would make in the middle of a typhoon? Emily.
Thank you very much, Debbie, for introducing me. Thank you so much for the other speakers. We don't have much time, so I'm gonna be brief. But yeah, I think all the speakers already explained that, you know, AI can be used to help or harm society. And I think it's clear that if AI is not effectively regulated, it will continue to violate our right to privacy and continue to discriminate against marginalized communities. So yes, in Thailand, we have adopted the 4.0 strategy to boost the economy. We have the Personal Data Protection Act that has just been enacted on 1st of June of 2022. But we don't think that it is enough. So I would like first to follow on what we was talking, especially when it comes to ethnic minorities. You know, in Thailand, we also have a targeting of Malay Muslims through racial profiling. And it's not done through necessarily social media, but it's done through the misuse of AI by the government under the name of national security and under the name of surveillance. So in 2019, you know, Thailand passed the National Intelligence Act, which permits the acquisition of information that impacts national security. As a result of that, in the southern province border of Thailand, the government has been collecting DNA samples of Malay Muslim through AI facial recognition as well, and also alongside with data on the national ID cards. So it means that there has been also thousands of surveillance cameras with AI that were deployed in southern Thailand in 2020 to increase the monitoring and surveillance in the name of national security. So since the government possesses biometric data of the locals and mainly the Malay Muslim, there is a possibility that it could be linked to AI embedded cameras, which were intended for locating insurgents. So here the role of AI really amounts to ethnic racial profiling and accelerates the conflict instead of solving it. Another way that the Thai government has been misusing AI is through social media monitoring. And it's mainly through the Anti-Fake News Center that has applied a hybrid of human and AI to help verify information shared online and combat fake news. But in reality, it has been misused by the government to get anyone criticizing, you know, the actions of the government or the government response to COVID-19. So when we saw that the Data Protection Act finally entered into force, we thought that maybe, you know, it would be a way to mitigate mass surveillance of the population in southern Thailand and a way to mitigate the misuse of the COVID-19 pandemic and the misuse of fake news to target human rights defenders. But AI still carries privacy and data security risk under the new legislation passed by Thailand. Because the 2019 Personal Data Protection Act, which just came into force, although it prohibits the use, collection, and disclosure of data without the owner consent, although it's a step in the right direction, but it does not specifically address the use of AI and automation at all in the legislation, which means that AI still remains unregulated. And this loophole fails to specify consumer rights to be informed about the existence of automated decisions making and profiling. The other issue that we see with the Data Protection Act is that it includes protection of data collected by the parliament or any executive authorities under the name of national security. Just like the National Intelligence Act, just like the Computer Crime Act, just like the Cybersecurity Act, the Data Protection Act allows the government to violate our right to privacy and to collect on the data under the name of national security. So what do we have left in Thailand now? We have the National AI Ethics Guidelines, which were approved in February 2021 by the Thai cabinet. Those guidelines provide for ethical principles that are recommended when designing, developing, deploying, and implementing or using AI products and services in the way that must comply with international human rights standards and privacy rights. But again, those are just mandatory guidelines. They are just voluntary guidelines, and they are not mandatory. And even those guidelines still present issues and loopholes. So in the case of Thailand, It's only a set of norms that do not create legal rights and obligations. It is not human-centered. It means that the guideline is bound by the objective of boosting competitiveness through the use of AI and other associated technologies only. It does not comprehensively address the principle of non-discrimination and gender bias. So it means that it does not specifically address gender beyond the binary understanding, and there's no consideration included on how gender bias in AI may affect non-binary people and members of the LGBT community. It does not include a list of prohibited AI uses. So it's already reliant on the governments and stakeholders' good faith. And finally, it provides that AI system that process personal data should comply with the PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act. But as I just explained before, the Personal Data Protection Act itself does not regulate AI, and it presents loopholes because it allows the government to collect our data and to violate our right to privacy under the name of national security, which the Thai government has been doing, especially even more since the 2020 pro-democracy protests calling for true democracy. So there is a real need to really regulate AI. Having a data protection act that does not regulate AI and relying just on AI guidelines ethics is not enough. And we're seeing the trend around the world of government passing data protection laws following the GDPR, and then accompanying it with AI ethics guidelines that just remain voluntary. But this is not enough, especially for the global south and especially in countries, even in the global north, where the LGBT community and marginalized communities are being targeted. So we need a real effective regulatory framework to regulate AI through clear regulatory means. And we must ensure that AI is human-centered, non-discriminatory, and in line with international human rights standards. I'm going to stop here, and I would like to invite the participants to stay tuned, because we're going to launch our AI ethics report later this year, where we're going to be look more in details of the case of Thailand and what we want in terms of a proper AI regulation in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So what you've heard the voices of 4 kick-ass feminists basically saying that AI, the lack of regulation of artificial intelligence and machine learning is actually intensifying the vulnerability of marginalized populations. It's also being weaponized by repressive governments against broader human rights and democracy movements. And in this context, we have to analyze it intersectionally, that human rights defenders and activists who are women, from LGBT community, from ethnic and religious minorities, or even urban and rural poor, are being denied the access to technology, but also being subjected to intense surveillance and oppression by repressive regimes. And trying to fight back also requires a great deal of courage, because we're not just dealing with repressive regimes, but also giants like Facebook and other social media and technology platforms. Basically, by exposing how this works, is already a powerful form of resistance. And already we saw a strategic litigation. We've seen people pushing back on rainbow washing, actually talking about actual regulation, not guidelines. Lisa, you mentioned something about how AI tends to almost spies on you. But basically, this is not just some stalker boyfriend. This is actually technology which is in every part of our lives. And when we have random conversations, we suddenly get aggressive marketing suggesting us all kinds of products. Unfortunately, it's failed me. AI has still not promoted to me effective weapons and tools of how to get rid of repressive dictators. So anyone who's listening, please come up with those products, easy to use and accessible. But Lisa, I wanted to come back to you. You talked about the ways in which gender bias was being exercised and how people were being persecuted. What are some of the solutions?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Debbie. Yeah, yes, of course, there's this bias, and even Jean mentioned earlier, and even when I was talking earlier, that when we talk about the AI workforce, it's male dominated. So whenever they create the algorithms, they are the ones creating the rules, and when they do that, they also bring in their bias into the algorithms. So that is one. I think, of course, number one is they have to be conscious of their biases. But as Jean was saying earlier, it's also important to for the workforce to be more diverse. But Jean was saying that, of course, it shouldn't be just the women and trans women and steer. It doesn't work that way. There should be a conscious effort actually to be mindful of these biases. Emily mentioned this, that when developing actually AI in the design, in its development, and even for the policies that government come up with, the laws, the roadmaps that we come, they should be conscious that it should be something that's human rights centered, and gender should always be included, factored in when considering the development of AI, because we have to be, because as we said, there's a lot of discrimination already, the stereotyping, and then there's it has social economic impact on the users, especially women.
Thanks, Lisa. Shunling actually sent a question. Are there any good examples of good AI and data protection regulations that could effectively tackle the challenges described? Emily has already replied to the question in the chat, so thank you, Emily. We're in the last 2.5 minutes, so this is the time to wrap. I'm going to start with Emily and backwards. Emily, then Wewenu, then Jean, then Lisa. 30-second grab. Say what you want. Maybe not relevant to the topic, but say what you want for 30 seconds.
No, thank you. I think the topic of AI is very, very important. It's very rare to hear feminists speaking about AI. It's often, people often think that it's a male-led discussion. So I'm very glad that we have this discussion, because as feminists, as women, we're also expert on the issue. It was very insightful to hear all the speakers, and I'm happy that we were able to bring a broad spectrum of views on the issue. And again, I just want to say that in order to be able to protect ourselves from unchecked AI ethics, it's inevitable that we are being impacted by AI. So first is really to understand when and how AI is being used around us. Second is really to minimize the sharing of our privacy sensitive data. And finally, it's really to continue to amplify the calls for legislative reform in AI regulation and data protection.
Thanks, Emily. Wei, very quickly. 30 seconds.
Thank you. So Emily has rightly provided the recommendations and thoughts. I must say that the global regulatory framework is not enough, but there has to be regulations for each content, the country and context. And based on, and it has to be also, as previously mentioned by the speakers, human-centered and gender-oriented, and must be able to tackle the issues that we outline, the disparity within the social media, as well as must be able to tackle the propaganda and hate that affect to specific populations. I guess that's all. And also, lastly, those media companies or groups or agencies that enable to promote hate and racism and created violence attack as a consequence must be held accountable. They must be liable for their complicity in this situation.
Thanks, Wei Wei. Jean, you get the 5 seconds to see us out. And before Jean goes, thank you, everybody. Hope to see you at RightsCon next year, maybe in person. Big hugs, lots of love, lots of solidarity. Jean, see us out.
Thank you. To researchers like myself in the field of machine learning, your responsibility does not end by the time your models get deployed to product. Think twice, thrice, or 10 times. Make sure that it's human-centered and that it values, the core of humanity. Thank you.
There you heard it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to Mirinda, our technical support. And really hope to see you next year at RightsCon, maybe in person.